This past weekend, I went to a showcase tournament in Porterville, California. The winner received this showcase. That's right, I won the whole thing. I brought, of course, my beloved Boba Green. This list in particular has gone through many changes, as you could probably tell by the title of the deck. The dash copy. I got tired of renaming decks. If you want to see more about the actual deck building process and all the iterations that this Boba Green list went through, you can go ahead and click on this video and see kind of the details of how I went through this all through set 2. But for this one, I'm really just going to talk about the tournament, kind of talk about my games and how they went. So let's get into that. The tournament itself, there was a little bit over 20 of us. It was Swiss 4 rounds into a top 8 cut. First round, I get paired against a new Boba Red. Okay, so he's going hero, green, red. And the only time I'm worried about this color combination is when it's Sabine green. This, to me, is just a slower version of Sabine green with a little bit of a worse leader, in my opinion. Really, all that happened is he tried this aggro-type game plan. He had a lot of units with ambush, obviously taking advantage of those keywords for his leader to pop off. It was kind of just, he kept getting put in these awkward positions where he was trying to push damage, but I just had answers for it. I was able to respond because it's just not that fast of a deck. So I won it 2-0. Now the next match, round 2, was a Kira Green. This is piloted by one of my buddies, one of the guys that I drove down to this tournament with. Shout out to Toby. Shout out to the scruffy looking podcast that he's a part of. Now, my deck is probably one of the most anti-blue control decks out there, right? Blue is dealing a lot of dealing with singles threats with, Power of the Dark Side, Takedown, Vanquish, right? They can deal with one thing each turn, and my deck just slams down tons of threats each turn, just going wide as possible. And it's really tough for blue to keep up with unless they have Super Laser Blast, right? So my whole objective is just to win before Super Laser Blast. And it seems to work out pretty well most of the time. That's basically how these games went. He didn't really find his ramp, and I did, and that puts me at a huge advantage. Probably my favorite play of the game was at 4 resources. I had a Super Laser Tech on the board. That's it. He drops a Chilled Sin. Shows me 4 blue cards, of course. Becomes a 6/6. Like, okay, my Super Laser Tech against a 6/6. I'm kind of locked down, right? But I played a Moment of Glory on this Super Laser Tech edition, making him a 6/5 for the phase. I was able to take out his Chilled Sin, put it down as a resource, and then get my Boba turn unlocked. And that really just sealed the deal right there. That really just solidified my position on board, and I was able to take the game. So, another 2-0. Round 3, get paired into another buddy of mine running Sabine Energy Conversion Lab, my most hated deck right now. Shout out to Eric, another member of the scruffy looking podcast. Go check him out. To me, this was going to be like a true test of how my list was going to perform, because I was really teching for this matchup. I was really skewing my list to be able to deal with Sabine. And honestly, it worked out pretty well. I'd say the biggest highlight each game was that I was just able to deal with his Sabine before he was able to smack a Darksaber on her. And that's kind of the key, right? I have the Hot Shot Blasters. One game I had a Toro out, and I was able to Hot Shot Blaster him and snipe his Sabine as soon as she came out. And that kind of just turned the whole game in my favor. And now all of a sudden, he has to deal with my stuff, right? He has to deal with that Toro. I'm ahead. He's got to start trading units. And that's really the way I win these aggro matchups is I press on the gas. I'm freaking going face. I'm killing your units. And I'm putting enough pressure to where all of a sudden the aggro deck has to catch up. All of a sudden the aggro deck has to deal with my stuff, right? So instead of just dealing with their units constantly, you got to put on enough pressure to make them start thinking about having to deal with your stuff. Now, my favorite play of the game wasn't even a play I made. This is an example of him having to deal with my units, right? So he had a Poe on the board, and I had, that's all he had. He just had a Poe. And I had a freaking Toro. I believe he was damaged. He had a couple damage on him from killing a unit earlier. I had Boba Leader, and I had a ship. I think it was a mercenary gunship or something like that. He's on the play. He uses ECL for a Fleet Lieutenant. Stick with me. Fleet Lieutenant swings into my damaged Toro to finish him off with that ambush. Okay? Is on attack, targets Poe. Poe swings in, finishes off my Boba, and then he discards a card to deal 2 damage to my ship in space. So he wiped out my entire board with a Fleet Lieutenant Poe combo. And I thought that was pretty freaking sweet. But even after that, I was able to take the games 2-0. Round 4, I get paired against a Han yellow. Double yellow, set 1 Han. The only other person is 3-0 in Swiss. Another local guy from Fresno, my guy Kevin. You probably see him in the chat sometimes. Han Yellow, I was really surprised by. There were 3 Han Yellows, and 2 of them were doing really, really well in this event. And they were doing really well against like control decks. I didn't realize how anti-control this deck was. But when you think about it, it makes sense. They have all the hand hate you could want. They have the resource hate with DJ. They have tech, who gives them access to all of their resources, immediately giving them card advantage, which is what control wants. Control wants to have the card advantage. But as soon as you play tech, boom, now I have 8+ cards in my hand, essentially. Right? And I think that really just works well against control. But doesn't really work well against my list. My deck doesn't really care if they have the card advantage. My deck doesn't really care if they steal my resource, especially on the 7 resource turn. I really have to deal with tech as soon as he's dropped because I don't want them to steal a resource from me on that Boba turn, because they could just completely eliminate my leader turn altogether, right? But that never ended up happening. I was able to deal with his units as they came down. He was freaking making me discard like crazy, and towards the late game ended up being able to play DJ smuggled out for 7. But at that point, it didn't really matter because I can still play Fire Spray. And I think I even ramped, so I was still able to play like Vader or Maul for 7. So it was annoying. We ended up playing for a while, but it didn't end up mattering. And I was able to take it 2-0. So after Swiss, I was 4-0. We enter into Top Cut. This is what the bracket looked like. This is the top 8. This is who's playing in the first round. Now, I was paired against a Cad Green, another local Fresno guy. Man, I was so pleased to see Cad Green in the top 8. I was so pleased to see Jose in the top 8. He was so excited, man. I was in the bathroom before, like when they were announcing top 8. They put it up on the screen, and I just hear like freaking shouting and cheering, and I was like, what is going on? And I went out, and man, he was so excited to make top 8. It was freaking awesome. I'm gonna be honest here. This match was probably my toughest match in the entire event. I don't know what it is about like the yellow green. I think the closer you are to my deck, I think the tougher the matchup's gonna be. The first game, he came out hot, and he was, dealing a ton of damage. He's got the like Proxima Underworld combo going where he's just pinging base, pinging creatures. Like, I was kind of playing around it a little bit, but it kind of having to play around the ping set me back on board a little bit. And so we ended up getting pretty late into the game. Like, I think we got up to 9-10 resources, and I was at like 20 life. I only had 5 life left, but I was able to squeak it out. It was pretty tough finishing off a 30 HP base. Man, Cad Bane's just a tough leader to deal with when he comes out. I have to like solidify my board presence before he does, because as soon as he comes out, now I'm worried about Relentless Pursuit, giving him a shield, and an 8 health unit with a shield is no joke. I don't know how good Cad Green is in the grand scheme of things, but against my deck, I think it is one of the better matchups for my opponent. But yeah, he did really well. The first game was very close. The second game, I think I played around the pinging a little bit better, and he didn't get his ramp. He didn't get his Lady Proxima early, so this really gave me the advantage, and I was able to just press and press and press and just take the game pretty handedly. But shout out to him, man. That was pretty sweet game, pretty sweet deck. I love Cad Bane. So round 2 of the top 8, I get matched into a Vader Green. This guy lost to Kevin, who's playing Han Yellow, earlier in Swiss. Right, it was a pretty dominant win for Han Yellow. But in bracket play, Vader Green took it. They went to 3, and Vader Green was able to squeak it out. But man, that last game, I was watching it, Vader was on 28 damage on his base. And I believe Han had 5 damage on his base. And he just was dropping sentinels like crazy, and he took back over the board and really stabilized. He didn't heal. He was at 28 like the rest of the game. But that stabilization from Vader Green, man, just dropping all those sentinel units. There was nothing, absolutely nothing Han could have done to squeak out the win. And yeah, it was pretty nuts. But anyway, I matched into Vader Green, and I wasn't really too stressed about this game. Sometimes I'm kind of like, okay, if he can ramp really hard and get to his late game as soon as possible, like if he double ramps, then I could be in trouble. Drop a Crate Dragon, bring out Vader early, like, hard for me to come back from. But he was never able to get his double ramp off. I think he barely ramped. I don't think he ramped in the second game. But first game definitely did, and he just wasn't able to deal with everything I was putting down. Like, even, Force Choke, Open Fire, it's just not enough to really clear my board. He needed Overwhelming Barrage, but I knew that's what he needed, so I was just dealing with his units as soon as they came down, and then just pushing damage after that. And I was able to win these games pretty easily. 2-0. Now we go to the finals. My boy Toby freaking dominated the rest of the tournament. After we played, he freaking found his stride, man. He was starting to focus on ramping. He was like, man, I'm really feeling the deck now. We talked about it throughout the tournament. Kind of like teammates. And it was really cool to see him, like, my teammate, do really freaking well the rest of the event. He was dominating. He was on fire. And it was really cool to play him in the finals. This game, he really did try to focus on ramping more, but similar things went down, man. I didn't get the crazy Super Laser Tech moment of glory moment off, but very similar thing happened. 4 resources, he plays Chilson. I have a Super Laser Tech out. It's like, well, we've seen this before. But I handled it a little bit differently. Super Laser Tech swings into Chilson, dealing 2 damage, putting him down to 4 health. Super Laser Tech goes to a resource. I'm at 5 resources now. Boba comes out, finishes Chilson off. Boom, Boba turn. And after that momentum swing, he kept playing Vigilance a few times, but dealing with one thing on board and healing 5 wasn't enough for like a Zuckus. It wasn't enough for having like a blaster equipped Toro. My threats were too big, and he wasn't able to get his barrage off, because again, as soon as I see a green control deck, I'm like, okay, I'm going to take out all their units so they don't have a barrage target. That's like the key in this matchup. He brings out Kira. I do whatever I can to kill it because she's such a great barrage target. And funny enough, he did have barrage in his hand ready to target Kira, ready to wipe my board. But if I can deal with his units, then he doesn't really have that as an option. He has to wait for Super Laser Blast, and it was never available. I just don't want to get to 8 resources. I just want to win the game fast, and that's pretty much exactly what happened. So in the finals, I took it 2-0. I didn't drop a single set this entire tournament. Not a single set. 14-0 in sets, 7-0 in matches total. And boy got the Hondo. I'm pretty freaking stoked about this. He's a very sweet looking showcase. He's one of the cheaper ones, but he just looks sweet. This is just a trophy for me at this point, right? Like, pretty sweet trophy. Well, that's the event, guys. Thanks for watching the whole thing. If you haven't checked out my set 2 deck building video, go ahead and check that out. It shows you exactly why I leaned into this build of Boba Green and just kind of my thought process through set 2 and how many freaking iterations I went through. So that's it.